Hey, everybody, we've got a great one for you today. For a change, the great Barbara McQuade joins us. You know her as the former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan and now a law professor at the University of Michigan. And joining her is Daniel Richman, who was a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York and is now a professor at Columbia Law School. They're here to discuss how Trump's unprecedented takeover of the Justice Department has dangerously undermined its credibility, whether it's by firing so many of the federal prosecutors who took on the January 6th offenders or hiring sycophants like Pam Bondi, who has announced investigations Trump asked for, regardless of whether there is any evidence to support them. I mean, do you really think the Justice Department is going to prosecute Barack Obama for making it look like Russia was supporting Trump in the 2016 election? One problem, of course, is that Russia did try to help Trump beat Hillary Clinton. Was the announcement of the Obama investigation the beginning and end of it? And how do you think the professionals who are still in the Justice Department feel about having to lend their credibility to prosecute Trump's agenda? And we've all been watching the Epstein saga unfold. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who happened to also be Trump's criminal attorney, went down to Florida to interview Ghislane Maxwell, who has since been moved to a minimum security prison. Why would she be getting this sweet deal? Could it have something to do with Trump's hopes that she can clear his name, and will his supporters buy it? So I wanted to talk with veterans of the Justice Department to get some insider perspectives on the weaponization of the department, the damage it is doing, and the years it may take to fix it. We'll be right back with Barbara McQuade and Daniel Richman. It's a great one, for a change. Barbara, thank you for joining me again. Great to have you back.
Thanks, Al. Great to be here.
And Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I want to get your views on how Trump's complete takeover of the Justice Department goes against all precedent and has undermined its credibility. Barbara, you wrote the book, Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America. Does the Trump Justice Department ever dispense disinformation?
How long have you got?
Take your time. We got plenty of time. We can always add it if you go more than an hour on that.
Yes. I will say it began before he retook office in 2025 in his campaigning, talking about how the Justice Department had engaged in weaponization and lawfare by charging him with crimes. Of course, those were based in evidence we saw with our own eyes. They were based on things like documents found red-handed in his own home.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he claimed that all of that was a hoax and a witch hunt.
And he was convicted, of course, on 34 counts? What was it?
Absolutely, in New York. But with regard to the federal Justice Department, one of the things he did on his first day was to issue an executive order calling for accountability for this so-called weaponization. So in other words, what the last administration did was all wrong and all illegal. And so now we are just righting the ship by launching investigations into these people who abuse their power. That, of course, is all false.
And that's on Biden and now Obama and Brennan and Comey.
And just today I saw Letitia James. And so what we are seeing now, I think, is an actual weaponization of the Department of Justice, using law enforcement tools to go after political rivals. What's supposed to happen, Al, is an investigation begins when there's something called predication. That is a well-grounded factual allegation that a crime is being committed or that there is a threat to the national security. Instead, we are seeing Pam Bondi open these investigations based on Donald Trump's perceived grievances against his political rivals. And that, to me, is disinformation and a weaponization. The last thing I'll say about this is that since Watergate, there have been norms at the Justice Department to prevent this kind of political use of the Justice Department.
Because Nixon used his very politically, and his attorney general went to prison.
Absolutely. So, in response to that, a number of reforms were implemented throughout government, including two that I'll mention. One is something called the Justice Manual. It is the governing document for all federal prosecutors, and it has a provision that specifically prohibits prosecutors from ever considering partisan politics, positions, or associations in making charging decisions.
Oh, well, that's good. That should keep Trump from doing that.
So that's supposed to be the governing document. The other thing that is supposed to be in place is a strict prohibition on communications between the White House and the Justice Department, so that there is not even the appearance that there is any sort of political interference in prosecutors' decisions. And now we see Trump just issuing executive orders directing these sorts of investigations. So that norm has also been completely blown up.
And he's really made no bones about that. Now, you've both been in the Justice Department. Barbara, you were there for 8 years, right?
20 altogether, an assistant U.S. attorney for 12, and then Obama's U.S. attorney for 8.
Okay, his U.S. attorney for 8, and that was at the Eastern District of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel, how long were you a federal prosecutor?
I was there for about 5.5 years back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I'm old.
Whose administration was that then?
I was appointed by Rudolph Giuliani.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was a great U.S. attorney.
He was in many
ways.
Things
have happened since then.
And okay, what did you do in your role there?
I started, as everyone does, in general crimes, doing all sorts of things that would come in, whether drugs or violence or baby fraud cases. Spent a lot of time on a very long organized crime trial, and then did quite a few years of narcotics at a time when New York's murder rate was at its highest, and we were using drug prosecutions as a way to go after serious violence in New York. And then I ended up as chief of appeals, where we essentially are the legal advisors to the office and shepherd cases through the Court of Appeals.
And Barbara, as U.S. attorney, what were you responsible for?
Well, like Daniel, I was in the General Crimes Unit as a assistant U.S. attorney, and then went into national security cases. But as U.S. attorney, you sort of oversee the whole office. We had about 115 prosecutors,
Jeez.
Some doing criminal work, some doing civil enforcement, some defending the United States in cases. But we had a full range of cases ranging from national security to public corruption, corporate fraud, civil rights, hate crimes, drug trafficking offenses. So a whole variety of cases.
So not so much political stuff, right?
Public corruption, but again, it wasn't political. It was, in fact, probably our most significant case was the prosecution of the Democratic mayor of the city of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick, on public corruption charges. I was appointed by a Democratic president, and never once did it occur to us to consider his party politics. Never once did the Justice Department or the White House suggest to me, one way or the other, that we should go easy on a Democrat or stick it to him as a rival. We just did the work, and that's the way it had been, and that's the way it's supposed to be.
Now, you left as U.S. attorney for Eastern Michigan after Obama left. That's how it goes, right? I mean,
yes.
And those are political appointees, basically.
Yep.
But not where you were, Daniel. Is that less so?
The U.S. attorney is very much a political appointee. They come and they go. I think the Southern District, at least until now, has always considered it very lucky that its political appointees have come from the alumni network and really have led to, some variation in who they are and what administrations they come to. But every U.S. attorney has really brought a deep sense of what the office represents and the importance of protecting its historic independence.
So is there a lot of continuity
There's an awful lot of continuity. I keep on reminding myself that I served mostly under Republican presidents. It really didn't matter at all. The picture greets you as you come in the door, but that's the limit of it. Whatever agents you're dealing with, whatever prosecutors you're dealing with, are all focused on the mission and try to figure out what the right thing is and to do it. And that's it.
Is this less the case now with Trump?
Yeah, I certainly fear it is. To be clear, I think there are a large number of assistants and FBI agents and people throughout the department who are apolitical, continue to be apolitical. The only difference now is they worry properly that they may touch a case that for some reason the administration wants to push forward or wants to kill, and they'll be caught in that. Or if they exercise professional judgment in a way that is deemed after the fact not to the administration's liking, they'll be fired. I think they're trying bravely to do their job, and I assume they will until they can't, and then they'll leave because certainly the assistants I'm aware of won't stand for the kind of crap that's coming down from Washington these days.
Well, let's talk about that crap. How has Trump's treatment of the Justice Department been a departure from what we've seen in the past?
As Barbara said, this could go on for a long time. The list is long. Certainly putting manifestly unqualified people like Kash Patel at the head of the FBI is a huge departure. No one's ever going to pretend that all the heads of the FBI have been perfect and masterful at their jobs, but he's somebody whose only qualification is absolute loyalty and facility with writing children's books.
Absolute loyalty seems to be the number one qualification for justice positions.
Yes, and in a really twisted version of it, it's not just people who fail to follow orders, however unprofessionally oriented those orders are, but people who were just doing their jobs in the prior administration. You're seeing the firing of FBI agents and the firing of AUSAs for having been involved in January 6th cases.
Were they all fired or almost all of them?
I don't think, certainly you couldn't fire all the FBI agents involved in January 6th cases because the number of agents involved in that is huge. Similarly, you couldn't fire all of the assistants in the District of Columbia who were involved in those cases, but quite a few assistants in District of Columbia have been fired, certainly those who were on probationary terms, and quite a few who had leadership roles. In the FBI, those who have had important roles in marshaling those cases through have been fired. So just to pick up on your point, it's not just loyalty right now. Loyalty is judged for having just done your work in a prior administration in a way that is now deemed not to the liking of this administration.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Barbara McQuade and Daniel Richman. If you've tried store-bought healthy breads and bagels, you know they taste like they're made from recycled cardboard. So when the artisan bakers at Royo sent me their variety box of, quote, healthy breads and bagels, I fully expected them to be dry, boring, and cardboard-like. I was so wrong. You have to give Royo a try. They arrive tasting amazingly fresh. That's because the folks at Royo care about the quality of every product. Everything is baked fresh daily, and it gets better. They keep their ingredients clean and minimal. The breads are low in carbs and high in fiber and protein, making them keto friendly. The sliced bread is only 30 calories per slice, and they're great for sandwiches. I'm old-fashioned, so I still love making a simple PB&J, but Royo's slices are versatile for sandwiches of all kinds, say a BLT. If you're looking for a healthy bread alternative to cut back on some carbs, Royo is a good company that has your back. Plus, it's kosher. So I got you 20% off. Go to eatroyo.com and use my promo code Franken. for your 20% off. That's promo code Franken at eatroyo.com. And we are back with Barbara McQuade and Daniel Richman. Trump seems to be coming at the justice system from all angles. He's continued attacking judges who don't rule in his favor. He's done something, he's gone against Boasberg. Is that the judge who ruled on those Venezuelans that went to El Salvador?
Yeah, I can pick up on that one. So one of the things that we have seen Trump do is when a judge issues a decision he dislikes, he goes after the judge. So he'll call them, I think he's called Boasberg a left-wing lunatic and a radical Marxist and other things. He is anything but. He is the chief judge of the district court for the District of Columbia. But you may recall that when the Trump administration tried to spirit those immigrants out over the weekend and during the night to Venezuela, there was a emergency hearing for a temporary restraining order that Judge Boasberg conducted virtually on a computer. He had a hearing and he ordered that no planes take off and that any planes in the air be turned around. Of course, that's when we heard people like Emil Bove and others argue that, well, because that order wasn't in writing, we didn't think it really counted. What? I mean, of course it counts, even if the judge issues it verbally, especially during a virtual hearing on a weekend. You bet it counts.
And there's a history of their ignoring orders, right?
Yes, in fact, there was a whistleblower who was working on these cases who came out and said that Bove, before he was confirmed as a judge on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, while he was a high-level Justice Department official, had said we might need to ignore court orders and we might need to tell the judge F you. And so it was against that backdrop that they proceeded to these hearings. And this whistleblower said that he was often kept in the dark about what was really happening. And so it put him in the uncomfortable position of being able of having to tell a judge he didn't know what was happening. And that's what got him suspended for failing to zealously advocate on behalf of the Justice Department. So Judge Boasberg ordered that because these men had not been given habeas corpus rights, the right to have a court review, due process, their detention and removal from the country, that he halted the planes from departing and entered a temporary restraining order. And he later began asking questions about contempt for violating his order. It was that series of decisions that caused Donald Trump to make these allegations about Judge Boasberg, that he is, this leftist lunatic. And we also saw allies of Donald Trump, including J.D. Vance, suggesting that it was inappropriate for a federal judge to check the power of a president who, after all, had a mandate from the voters to aggressively enforce immigration laws. Voters may have chosen to prefer immigration enforcement, but they did not give him a mandate to dispense with the law or the Constitution. And that's what this judge was upholding. And so just last week, we saw Pam Bondi issue a complaint against Judge Boasberg, who at a non-public meeting with, he's a member of the Judicial Conference, which is a group of judges who get together to discuss court rules and policies. As the representative of the District of Columbia, as their chief judge, while he was there, he shared with Chief Justice John Roberts that his colleagues had asked him to pass along the observation that they were concerned that the Trump administration might disobey court orders, which could result in a constitutional crisis.
And that's been the case. They've ignored a lot of court orders, haven't they?
Yes. And so what the problem, I think, with this complaint is, number one,
the complaint against Boasberg now.
Yeah, there's nothing inaccurate about what he says. But number two, they accuse him of violating the canons of judicial ethics, which prevent a judge or direct a judge to avoid saying anything publicly that might put the judiciary in a bad light. Now, he didn't say this publicly. He was telling the head of the judiciary what his colleagues had asked him to say. He did not say it publicly. It only got reported because someone at the meeting wrote it down and sent it to some Federalist Society muckraker who posted it online. And so I don't think this complaint is going to be successful. I don't think any judges are going to find anything meritorious about it. But what it does is it gives fodder to Trump supporters to say, oh, yeah, that judge got in trouble. He did something wrong. He's unethical. He's shady, in a way that advances Trump's agenda and undermines public confidence in our judiciary.
The Trump people have Trump has gone after the law firms, and these law firms try their cases in federal court, or have some been banned from that if they've refused to go along with Trump?
None has been banned from appearing in federal court. These have been orders trying to keep them out of the building and the like.
How can you try a case if you're out of the building?
You can't, and there's a silliness to a lot of the content of these orders, but the important move is to really put these firms under threat and make them worry about retaining their partners who are very mobile these days and whose clients might find it amiss that the firm is being targeted.
So how have the firms that caved, how have they been doing in terms of losing partners, and how are they doing in terms of recruiting young lawyers out of law school?
I think it remains to be seen what the recruiting effect is going to be.
I understand that the top students are actually going to the ones that didn't fold.
To some extent. I mean, I don't want to be a great defender of the firms that folded, but essentially what you're seeing are business decisions in various ways. The firms that are primarily litigation based and aren't worried about their private equity partners moving are ready to fight. The firms who are worried, like Paul Weiss used to be a real litigation firm. It's now very much not just a litigation firm. They folded. Sussman Godfrey, the ultimate litigation firm, are fighting away. And kudos to Sussman and the litigation firms that are fighting. But I think firms exist in part to increase profits, and they act accordingly in various ways.
I'll interject there for just a second, if I may. I agree in part with what Daniel's saying, and I disagree in others. One is I can tell you anecdotally, small sample set, but some of the top students that I see at our law school are shifting. They're not applying to the law firms that caved. They are applying to the law firms that have chosen to fight, and that is
That's
a
what
significant
I've
matter.
heard. Yeah.
Yes, people have left. There is a young woman who is left Skadden Arps, who's been sort of leading the charge for people who've left private firms in an effort to help them find new jobs. And there was a big exodus from Paul Weiss of some very top lawyers, including Damian Williams, the former U.S. attorney there. So there has been some cost to all of this to the law firms that have caved. And I think, although initially they felt it was a good business decision, what we have seen over time is that some clients have left because they don't want to be affiliated with a law firm that caved. Now, I will support what Daniel said, however, by saying this. I think it's always important not to blame the victims. And although I would like to see these law firms who have the wherewithal and have the financial resources to fight because it's so important for the rest of us, I do feel some empathy for them. When I was working as a prosecutor in some of these public corruption cases, one of the things I saw was that oftentimes businesses felt extorted and felt the need to go along with the demands of the extortionist because they were concerned about their employees, their own families, their contracts. And if all of that got cut off financially, not only would they suffer individually, but there would be a domino effect on many people for whom they were responsible. And so it's important not to lose sight of who is the real wrongdoer here, and that is the Trump administration, not the law firms who have been targeted and have been forced to make some very difficult choices.
As for the prosecutors in the Justice Department, who has Trump fired? Is it fair to say lawyers who prosecuted January 6th cases were by and large fired?
Yes, and in New York, we certainly have the forced resignation of those who wouldn't go ahead with the quashing of the prosecution of Mayor Adams. We also had Maureen Comey being fired just recently.
And why do you think she was fired? I mean, daughter of Comey, or could it have something to do with the Epstein case that she is the one who prosecuted Maxwell, right?
Yes, she did. I suspect that the real reason she was fired is because she was on Laura Loomer's list to be fired. And I think once one's on the list, now that the president has delegated personnel decisions to a podcaster, no offense to podcasters.
No offense taken.
I think she's a podcaster. At any rate, she's certainly an influencer of the president, and that's what matters. She wanted him fired, and Maureen was fired.
And one thing that's really important to note, Daniel, is Maureen Comey and some of these others are simply getting an email that says, from Pam Bondi, effective immediately, you are hereby terminated from government service pursuant to Article 2 of the Constitution, which, of course, is just the section of the Constitution that gives the president executive power. All of these people are protected by civil service protection laws that says they can only be fired for cause, that they have appeals rights. And instead, these are just being ignored and bulldozered.
And this is unusual. This is new.
Yeah, this is absolutely new. I mean, when I was working in government, terminations were very rare and required some very serious misconduct before someone would leave. And there's a reason for that. We passed the Pendleton Act in this country in the late 1800s in an effort to remove this whole spoils system that had previously existed, where the president rewarded his benefactors, gave them jobs in government, and there were a bunch of hacks who didn't know how to do anything. Instead, since then, we have developed what is one of the real strengths of our government, which is the professional civil service. Independent experts who are doing important work and have continuity from one administration to the next. Donald Trump is just blowing that up without any approval. There have been some lawsuits filed. We'll see how those shake out. But I think what he will argue is, under my unitary executive theory, I control the executive branch, no ifs, ands, or buts, and Congress can't tell me what to do.
We're really seeing, to pick up on what Barbara was saying, the unitary executive theory was kicking around as a justification, at least hypothetically, in prior administrations. But now we really see a belief that one can act unilaterally, not just to overturn civil service protections, but to overturn congressional appropriations, to overturn anything that stands in the way of the president just doing what he feels like. And these theories aren't going to be tested for a while, if at all. The courts are going to be way behind this, particularly since the Supreme Court is going to shut down lower courts as they try to push back against it. So at the very best, it won't be dealt with until it gets to the Supreme Court on a merits case. And that's going to take years in many cases. So this unilateral executive theory has now been put to a use that really is, I think, devastating to not just the civil service, but to many aspects of policymaking.
What price does the Justice Department pay for clearly being so in the tank for Trump and his administration? Are they any less effective? Are judges skeptical?
I think what people forget is that the Justice Department exists in a very complex network, and it relies on all sorts of entities for cooperation, whether juries, grand juries, witnesses, police, local officials, and citizens more generally. And when they lose confidence in the apolitical workings of the department, then their reactions essentially get driven by what their political preferences are. If you like the president, the cases the president brings are just fine. If you don't, you will, if you're a jury, possibly acquit. If you're a grand juror, possibly refuse to indict. The whole system unravels. And if you look at the history of federal criminal enforcement that I've been writing about from the beginning, this is the way it really was. Acquittals were a normal thing. Grand jury failures to indict were a normal thing before the creation of the Justice Department in 1870, and they were for some time afterwards. That's the world that I fear we might return to if this is not nipped in the bud. And the way it gets nipped in the bud is partially by these institutions pushing back, And the key mover that we don't see any action from is Congress. Congress, from the very beginning, has been the prime guardian of U.S. attorney independence.
But the Republicans in Congress don't seem to have any interest in
Not at all. Just as we see when it comes to appropriations, they're essentially throwing up their hands and giving away critical institutional power. Now, can that be righted? Maybe. It's going to take a little while.
It might take a midterm election.
Exactly. It will take at least a midterm election. Once you have divided government, things work a bit better. When Bush fired all sorts of U.S. attorneys back in George Bush and his administration, once the Democrats took control of the Senate, you had hearings that really pushed back hard on what the administration did. And that could be the case again. But you need divided government.
So how different is the Trump Justice Department from, say, the Bush Justice Department?
Well, one thing I would point out is the nature of the appointees to U.S. attorney positions. So think about some of the people that we have seen nominated by Donald Trump. Alina Habba in New Jersey, his former attorney, who doesn't seem like a particularly good attorney. She was sanctioned. She was scolded by a judge. She didn't even seem to know how the rules of evidence worked. And there she is in New Jersey. And I might add, on her first or second day on the job, doing something that all U.S. attorneys are told to stay away from, and that is cosplaying as an agent by participating in arrest. You're inserting yourself as a witness. You're doing something you're not trained to do. And there she was, making nice pictures for social media. She also, during an interview in one of her stays on the job, said that she would help turn New Jersey red, which again is not the job of a U.S. attorney who is supposed to be apolitical. We've got Jeanine Pirro in Washington, D.C., and she's there only because there was one pushback. That was Eagle Ed Martin, who was serving as an interim and was using his office as an intimidation factory by sending out letters to politicians and even Georgetown Law School in an effort to control what he saw as their woke agenda. It's so unusual to see U.S. attorneys acting in such a blatantly political way. I worked in the Department of Justice under Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and for a smidge Donald Trump. And in those pre-Trump eras, as Daniel said earlier, you had professionalism regardless of who was the U.S. attorney. All of that has changed during this administration.
These officials who say that Trump wants to hold wrongdoers from previous administrations accountable, like Obama. What is the case against Obama that they're...
We can't help you. I mean, this goes to what Barbara was saying about predication. You need to be able to, at the very least, give a straight-faced description of maybe possible evidence before a case should even be thought about.
I mean, he's basically accused of falsifying the story that the Russians favored Trump, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they did, and it's been proven, right?
Yes, and if he wants to, Trump, if this meeting ever happens, which I'm not so sure it will, he can ask Putin clearly about Putin's efforts when he meets with him next week or the week after. I mean, it really is quite amazing to me that even assuming there was no grand plot on the part of Trump to really work with Putin, the extent of evidence that Putin will have in his possession of whether it's involving Paul Manafort or the meeting in the Trump Tower, that we have a sense of, but we don't have a full sense of.
Well, I don't think Putin's going to be any more forthright and truthful in his... Yes, okay, of course. I was going to say then Ghislane Maxwell. I mean, that is amazing.
I'm enjoying every minute of that. And I hate to say enjoy about a horrendous series of crimes that she was very much a part of that have had a devastating effect on so many people. But the small bit of humor I'm deriving is from the administration's inability to deal with this case because you need credibility to deal with it. If you had a line prosecutor who really could stand up. And yes, it is interesting that Maureen Comey could have been that line prosecutor.
Well, they wouldn't want her to be questioning Maxwell. Now they chose the right guy to do that, Todd.
Todd Blanche.
Yeah.
It's far from clear to me, and probably to a whole lot of people, that what he was seeking from her is the truth, as opposed to things that will be useful to the administration. When you have the president's former lawyer sitting down with somebody who potentially could hurt the president.
And Comey, of course, prosecutor, so she knew all the testimony. So by all rights, if Congress was going to have somebody testify about it, it should be her.
Well, Congress isn't really interested in the truth either.
Yes. So we're seeing them go through the motions.
Yes.
And one thing I would add about the Maxwell case, it makes me very angry to see victims and survivors of sexual assault being treated like pawns in all of this. There's no legitimate law enforcement reason for Todd Blanche to be meeting with Ghislane Maxwell at this stage. She's been convicted, she's been sentenced, her case is on appeal, and suddenly, solely, it appears, to address a political scandal, he's down there meeting with her in prison, seeing if she can say anything that might help the president. And for what? Is she going to get some deal? She already got moved to a prison
sweetheart.
camp,
Yeah.
where which really feels like a reward. I guess I don't know all the reasons for her movement, but it is not the kind of place a convicted sex offender ordinarily goes, to a very low security prison camp. So that's already a benefit. But Donald Trump will not rule out the ability of a pardon for her. My gosh, politically, can you imagine how easy it would just be to say she's been convicted of heinous crimes? There are some real victims here. Absolutely not. I will never grant her a pardon. And says he said, well, I have the power to do it. Why is he dangling that over her head? She knows what he wants her to say.
Right.
Say Trump was never involved. I exonerate Trump, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some carrot dangling out there for her. The fact that it was Todd Blanche who conducted that interview is so irregular as to raise a red flag for me. If you really wanted to question her, you would send in someone who is deeply involved in the case, an investigator or a prosecutor.
Again, Comey.
Yeah, right. Somebody who knows that file. Instead, you send in Todd Blanche, who's new to the Justice Department and is that one of the top executives. It's like, I come from auto country. It's like taking the COO of General Motors and telling him to go down and change a carburetor. Like, we have people who do that. We don't need the boss to come do that. Why the boss? Well, perhaps because he is Donald Trump's former lawyer and is looking out for his interests.
Well, Daniel, let me ask you this. To get somebody who really understands the case and to really question her, somebody who sits there for 9 hours over 2 days doesn't do the job, right?
No. First of all, there's only one person left in the office who is the junior person on the Maxwell case who really knows it. But most importantly, when you have this pattern of firing assistants who don't execute on the preferences of the administration, no one could be sure that even an untainted line prosecutor sent in will be doing what we expect her to do. I'd like to think she would, but they have so muddied the waters with their essentially rule of terror to fire people who they disagree with or who aren't sufficiently loyal. They have a problem in really finding somebody who's capable of looking for the truth, who will report the truth, and will be perceived as saying the truth.
Let's go back to did the Russians favor Trump? Because that is a case. Are they actually going forward with that, do you think? That Obama falsified that?
I think that here, as in so many things the Trump administration does, the deliverable is the announcement of the investigation.
Uh-huh.
That's what they're going for. They're not going to find anything. I'm not even sure they're really looking. It's to be able to say, we're marshaling our resources to pursue this weaponization, details to follow. And of course, the details won't follow. They're not intended to follow.
And this is something that Marco Rubio, who was chairman of the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, had confirmed that, yes, the Russians did favor Trump. And there are a number of things that they did to do that. They Didn't they hack, emails of Podesta and other people and release them to WikiLeaks, who put them out at the time to go with the Democratic convention, all that kind of stuff?
But
Yes.
in his defense, I'd like to say Rubio will sign anything you give him. So who knows?
Well, let me say a word about that, Al, because you're absolutely right. So Robert Mueller conducted his investigation, of course, concluded there was insufficient evidence to charge conspiracy, but he did find that Russia sought to advance the campaign of Donald Trump at the expense of Hillary Clinton. And they cited a number of factors in that. One that you just mentioned was hacking into the DNC computers to steal emails and then releasing them through WikiLeaks on the very same day that the Access Hollywood tape comes out about Donald Trump in an effort to push that story out of the headlines. There was also the meeting at Trump Tower with Russians for the purpose of obtaining dirt on Hillary Clinton. There was the exchange of polling information about Midwestern states from
Right.
Paul Manafort to Konstantin Kilimnik, who was a Russian intelligence officer. And then there was a coordination of messaging to coincide with the release of emails about Hillary Clinton's health, that she was in poor health, that she was low on energy and other things. Now, what he found was there wasn't a sufficient actual coordination of those things, but that Russia offered those things and the Trump campaign welcomed them. And it isn't just Robert Mueller who said so. The U.S. Senate reached a similar conclusion. The Inspector General of the Department of Justice conducted an investigation into the origins of the Russia investigation and found that it was properly predicated, that same term we used earlier, when an Australian diplomat shared information about a conversation he had with George Papadopoulos, a member of the Trump campaign, who said, "We've got this dirt on Hillary Clinton. We're going to use it at the right time." In addition, there was John Durham, the special counsel
Who
appointed
tried to
by
prove
William
this.
Barr.
Yeah.
Yes, and he found nothing. The most he found was an FBI agent who made a false statement, who was brought to justice for that. And he charged a lawyer who came forward to the FBI with information, who was acquitted at trial. That's it. So, my gosh, this has been the most investigated issue in the face of the earth. I think it has been conclusively determined that Russia did try to help Donald Trump. There's this conclusion that there wasn't any proven change in the electoral count. That's true, but that doesn't mean there wasn't an effort there and that it wasn't a laudable
And not
investigation.
only that, but it doesn't prove that it didn't change.
Exactly. That's true.
I mean,
And the last point I'll make is the idea that they would charge Barack Obama with treason over this is also, I think, supportive of Daniel's statement that this is really all about the announcement and not about any real investigation, because treason requires that we be at war with another nation and that the defendant provide aid and comfort to the enemy. That just can't possibly happen because we were not at war with any country at the time of these alleged incidents. So all of it is a smokescreen, and I agree with Daniel that the announcement was probably the whole thing.
Daniel, what cases haven't been taken up that historically would have been taken up under?
It's hard to say. I mean, there are two parts of this. One is cases against friends of Trump. This pattern of dismissing cases, whether in California or elsewhere, of his allies suggests possibly, although we can't know, that there are investigations that might have been pursued against specific individuals that weren't because they have some sort of protection from the top. But I think more generally, what I find really troubling is federal criminal enforcement is not supposed to replace what states do. It's supposed to really contribute something special and I hope very useful to the country. And the thing they really can contribute is going after people who would otherwise have impunity. Those who can't be picked up on the center, we're talking about organized crime, white collar crime, all these things that take real work. And the feds have the strategic and other resources to go after them. And what we're seeing now is an administration that doesn't care in the slightest about those cases. We see them pulling agents off white collar cases, corruption cases, and the like to do immigration, to do maybe some violent crime, anything but what really we expect the feds to do, and no one else will do if the feds don't do them.
So you're saying instead of what should be taken up, they're taking up stuff that shouldn't be taken up.
Yes, I mean, let's just take Department of Homeland Security. They had within them a unit called Homeland Security Investigations that did fantastic work, whether going after child sex abuse material, child abusers, or various interesting kinds of organized criminal activity. So many of them have been pulled off just to round up people off the streets. FBI squads have been decimated to support immigration investigations. And when I say investigations, I just mean roundups because they're not even complex. This can change down the road, but you're taking agencies that really had missions that have really important aspects of those missions crumbled before their eyes.
And I'll add that prosecutors are similarly being directed in other directions, far more immigration cases than ever before, because resources are finite. So I know in my former office, for example, we had the capacity to do about 1,000 cases a year. And many of those cases were public corruption cases or corporate fraud cases. And those can take many months to put together an investigation using the grand jury process and subpoenaing documents and the like. Instead, they're going after low hanging fruit, people who are here on a visa overstay. It used to be that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, when they went after in their Office of Removal Operations, they prioritized targets based on danger to the community.
Right.
So we didn't prosecute criminally everybody who was a visa overstay. Many of those people were dealt with administratively.
I think that's what most Americans want, is that you go after the immigrants who've committed crimes.
I think that's right, but that's not what's happening now because, we know that early on, when the numbers weren't what Stephen Miller, Trump's advisor, wanted them to be, he got on the phone with the heads of all of the ICE offices and said, I want 3,000 arrests a day. You need to start going to Home Depot parking lots and 7-Eleven parking lots and rounding people up. And so instead of going after somebody who's got a criminal offense or is a threat to national security, which may take some days to find and locate and arrest, now it's let's go park in front of the school as kids get dropped off.
Or go to the courtroom where someone is checking in on what they're supposed to be doing and then arresting them.
And even churches, where in the past there had been policies against arresting people at places of worship. So finding people, and now it's grandmas and moms and dads and day laborers.
This is Mr. Cruelty is the point.
I suppose so. The numbers will be there, but I think those numbers are a little bit stacked because they aren't the people who are posing a risk to public safety.
And Americans don't want this. That polling has been pretty clear.
Let's be good. I want to see what Americans want. I'll wait until the midterms. It's scary to think that we really know what Americans want when Americans gave us this.
Well, they gave us this for a number of reasons, and won't go into necessarily all of them, but I think that Biden's debate performance and waiting until then to bow out, he didn't even bow out after that for a while. So, this was a close election, and we could have won this one.
Elections, as they say, have consequences, Alan. We're living them.
Yeah. Okay, so what percentage of cases have a partisan element to them in the Justice Department? How many don't? And has that changed during the Trump regime?
Well, I don't even know what you mean by partisan. I think cases against executives who I would never have thought of as partisan cases before, but to the extent they know the president or somebody they know has reached out to the president, they've become, if not partisan, at least politicized. So much of federal criminal enforcement.
So someone will not be prosecuted because they have a
correct
affinity for the
or
president.
Pardons. I mean, we've seen pardons.
Uh-huh.
And some people, I assume, will be prosecuted. I mean, one of the good things, I guess, is it requires a lot of institutions to go through before you could prosecute somebody successfully for a crime. You need to go through grand juries and judges. So there's less of a risk that somebody will be prosecuted improperly than that a case will be killed improperly. But both are very real possibilities.
Do you know about the Breonna Taylor sentencing?
Yep.
So the officer, Brett Hankinson, who fired 10 bullets into her apartment. They only wanted to sentence her to 1 day, him to 1 day. Now, the judge gave him, I guess, 33 months or something like that. But it was that something that came down, you think, from Trump?
I don't know. It's difficult to say. There are things that are reflective of a political worldview that, in my view, are appropriate changes from administration to administration, as opposed to naked partisan politics. For example, it is not unusual to see priorities shift from one administration to another. In the Biden administration and in the Obama administration, one of the priorities was prosecuting police officers who use excessive force, using pattern and practice cases against police departments who had unconstitutional policing procedures. But as we saw in the Bush administration, now we're seeing in the Trump administration a very sort of pro law enforcement worldview that is going easy. In fact, they have pulled back on all of the consent judgments they had with police departments around the country to institute reforms there. I think that's more of a political philosophy. It's not one I agree with, but I think that is within the bounds of ordinary executive control from one party to the other. The part where I get worried is when it is naked politics to earn cheap votes. Now, maybe this is an effort to say, look at me, I support our law enforcement officers, even failing to hold accountable someone who did something as egregious as, in my view, Officer Hankinson did.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Epstein for a little while. We were talking a little bit about that. Todd Blanche visited her, Ghislane Maxwell, in prison and spent, 9 hours with her? Then she was transferred to this club fed. Is that suspicious?
Very much so, in my view.
Mhm.
Partly just because the nature of her offense would make her ineligible for that kind of institution. It's a low security facility. It is the kind of place where white collar criminals go.
They said this has never happened before,
Yeah,
I
this is
think.
the kind of place where Elizabeth Holmes is staying,
Mhm.
and as a result, they've had to beef up their security there. It's the kind of place sometimes people walk away from, so there's an escape issue. I think a bigger issue is harm to Maxwell herself, and so I think that is why they've had to increase security
Mhm.
at that facility. I'm sure the people who are the guards there are not very happy about having someone they're not equipped to handle there. And so, why would she be sent there? Well, perhaps this is just a benefit in exchange for having a talk with Todd Blanche. But why would she get a benefit in exchange for a talk with Todd Blanche? Part of it seems to me a red flag that they are offering her something in exchange for something she can provide. And what is it she can provide to this administration? They would have pursued any other pro prosecution agreement before she was convicted or sentenced if she could deliver the names of some sex offender. Instead, what it seems to me they're looking for is some sort of exoneration of Donald Trump, and she knows what they want. And so it's hard for me to believe that anything she would say would have any credibility.
Right.
But I suppose once again it's just the announcement that Trump's been cleared that he's looking for.
Okay. Well, anything else you'd like to add?
I guess I would add this, in an agency like the Department of Justice, personnel is such a part of policy. We used to joke that if you want to be a good manager, hire good people because they make it easy. And I will tell you, the people I worked with at the Justice Department were just the best. Great integrity, nonpartisan, hardworking, diligent. And I worry that those are the people who've been fired, right? The people who worked
Right.
on the top cases, the January 6 cases, the Russia investigation, the Jack Smith's team, they're all gone. And the new hiring policy requires new employees to do these fawning essays about Donald Trump. They're asked to describe their favorite executive order that he's written and how you will help implement Donald Trump's agenda if you come into the federal government. What I worry is they're replacing all the good people with Trump loyalists. And then what do you do next time? If you come in and you are a president of either party of good faith, do you fire all these people who came in as Trump loyalists and try to replace them with people who are neutral and of integrity? Or does that further corrupt the Justice Department, which is supposed to hire people based on merit and not partisan politics? And if you do preserve that, which I guess I would tend to favor, these Trumpies are going to be embedded in government. They use the term burrowed in for decades to come.
I hope that doesn't happen, and I think that there would be cause to replace people who are overly partisan, and I think that that's exactly who Bondi and Trump are choosing as the tests that people had to fill out to get hired, tests. Well, thank you both.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be with you, Al.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening. That beautiful music is by Leo Kottke, the great Leo Kottke. I want to thank Peter Ogburn for producing this podcast. We'll talk again next week.